Okay. Yeah. Welcome everybody. Is it translating as well? Do you see any translations?
No.
Okay. Then we can officially start. Welcome everyone to this webinar on biodiversity management in greenhouses, organic greenhouses. This is part of a project called IPMWORKS that my organization, IFOAM Organics Europe, is part of. And the objective of this project is to promote the adoption of integrated pest management strategies based on a EU-wide network of farmers through peer-to-peer learning and joint efforts. This network of farmers is divided into sectors, and this particular webinar is targeted to the greenhouse sector and is part of a series of webinars that we've been organizing since last year. In every webinar, we targeted one sector. So IFOAM Organics Europe, for those of you who don't know, is the umbrella organization for the organic movement in Europe. And basically, we make Europe more organic. And yes, we contribute to the joint efforts part of IPMWORKS by covering organic strategies that are interesting for organic as well as conventional farming and can be part of the integrated pest management holistic approach. And there was someone else who was trying to join. Okay, they joined. So yes, this webinar is going to be, or I'm going to try to make it interactive by saying, please ask questions, share your experience. We're here to discuss. We have two amazing speakers who will give a talk and share their experience, but everybody is very much welcome to yeah, to participate. And even more, our speakers want to know what pests you're dealing with, how you tackle them, and to break the ice. Wait, I haven't introduced myself. So yeah, my name is Alba Said, and I work as a project coordinator in the Research and Innovation Unit of IFOAM Organics Europe. So yeah, I thought that to break the ice, we could start by doing a Menti. And I'm going to share the link. I hope everybody has access to, yeah, internet access. Of course you do. You can do it on your computer or your phone. I'm going to mute someone because I can hear myself. There you go. Actually, I shared the link before. So there you go. Let me know when you see the screen. When you are when you have opened the Menti. Oh, you're already answering questions. Okay. Okay, so the first question is, which group do you belong to? And with this question, we want to know who's here, basically, and yeah, to have an idea of how the conversation can, which direction it can take, and to also see who's interested in this webinar. And I'm going to share my screen so you can see. And here, do you see my screen?
Not yet.
You don't?
I think you're sharing if you've got two screens, you have to share the other one.
You have two screens.
Try sharing the one that you see us on.
Okay. Well, this is what I thought I had pressed. Can you see it now?
Yes.
Wow, this is interesting. So we are 17. 7 people have joined the Menti. Maybe some people just joined. Should I maybe share it again? Okay, if there's anybody new, here's a Menti link again. So we don't have any farmers. I was hoping we would. But yeah, there's an interest by the NGO non-profit sector in this webinar. I wonder if it's mostly my colleagues who have answered. Okay, one farm advisor or consultant. The other 10 people who haven't joined, are you having problems joining? Maybe they're not here. Okay, well, now we have an idea. Maybe the second question will not be so relevant if there are no farmers. But
there's someone waiting.
Yeah, I'm letting them in as I get the notification. What do you say, Monica and Jérôme? Should we present the other question, even if there are no farmers?
I don't know.
Or maybe it's
No
not
real
so.
interest.
Huh?
Maybe we could start the presentation, and maybe if a farmer arrives later
Maybe
on,
if they join.
he could answer.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's a good idea. All right, then I'm going to move on to present our speakers and the topic. Well, as you know, this webinar is about biodiversity, a crucial element of agricultural systems that has been continuously overlooked by policies, companies, the agricultural sector, despite the abundance of studies that point to biodiversity loss as a driver of the climate crisis, to the importance of protecting biodiversity for the well-being of humans and obviously other forms of life on Earth, and also to the power of biodiversity in increasing resilience of agricultural systems. So yeah, it's an important topic. And luckily, the European Green Deal aims to promote biodiversity and reduce pesticide use. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce you to the two speakers that we have. And one of them is Mónica González, who has worked as a researcher since 2003 and in 2010 started a line of research focused on the selection of native shrubs to promote the presence of beneficial auxiliary biodiversity in the greenhouse environment. And Monica will give you an overview of the role of biodiversity in managing pests and diseases, functional diversity, and ecological infrastructures to promote it. So welcome, Monica. And then we're going to have 10-15 minutes of questions and discussion. And after that, Jérôme Lambion will give another talk. He's an agronomist working at GRAB, Research Group for Organic Farming in southern France. He carries out applied research on crop protection, especially in greenhouse vegetable cropping systems. And Jérôme will provide you with a more technical explanation and clear steps to take if you want to manage the functional biodiversity in your greenhouse. So welcome, and I'm gonna leave the floor to you, Monica, if you want to share your screen.
Yeah. Thank you so much, first of all, to the organization and IPMWORKS project to give me the opportunity to be here. Also, it's Friday up to, and maybe it's summer, and maybe we were more keen on have a beer at this time. So thank you all to be here. And I don't know if you can see my screen.
Yes,
Yes.
Okay.
it's not on present. Now it's on presentation mode.
Yeah. I don't know. Okay. This is, I'm going to talk about using functional biodiversity as a new tool in IPM programs. Now I'm working in a company the last 3 years in AgroBio, which is a biofactory that it's located in the heart of the so-called Plastic Sea in Almeria, which is in the south of Spain. We provide pollination services and also biological control services, and we have our own production of bumblebees and also predators and parasitoids for greenhouse crops, but also we are focusing on outside crops and tree crops. We are working on more than 45 countries and on more than 50,000 hectares. It's a little view of where we are and what we are doing. I belong to the development department, and I'm focused on the management of functional biodiversity. I don't know why the okay. I'm going to give you a vision of where we are. It's true that our current model of agriculture is facing major challenges. Over the last few decades, our agriculture is increasingly technified, and intensive agriculture is the model which has focused mainly on production, but we were not very aware about the problems that this vision had produced, and our agriculture is being more and more vulnerable to the pest and disease, because this model has drawn a very simplified and fragmented agricultural landscape. We were not very aware about the consequences of the biodiversity lost. Take into account that biological control is present in all ecosystems, both the natural ones and the agricultural ones, thanks to the work and the job of the biodiversity of insects that give ecosystem service of regulation of pests. They were they control. They made a silent work of control phytophagous insects between the 50% of these insects that cause problems to our crops, and till now that we are losing this silent job, we are now facing very big problems of new phytosanitary alerts with new pests and disease that are causing big problems, and we don't have ways to control them right now. They are making our agriculture very, very weak. And this is why this is because we are going against what the agroecological theory states. We are simplifying the landscape, so we are this loss of diversity, the intensive management is going against the natural enemies diversity and is causing that pest population density arise. So maybe we should change our way and give a more agroecological view to improve the resilience of our agroecosystems. It's a fact that inoculative biological control is a success tool in horticultural crops. Here in Almeria, we changed our mind in 2007, and this is an example of this strategy works well, and it's a good tool to control pests. But we have to change our way to manage the crops, and also in this scenario with this new pest, also with a good biological control strategy, sometimes it's difficult to control the pest. We have to change the way of manage our crops, because effective biological control requires an abundance of different types of natural enemies and their arrival, and they should arrive at the right time. And of course, in outdoor crops, our major challenge is to maintain these natural enemies, the released one and the natural, in the orchard to prevent their escape, because if the crop can't give them all the resources they need, they will die or escape. So this is a major challenge when we release insects inside these outdoor crops. It looks like easier to manage biological control in these conditions, but not. That's why biological control by conservation is an essential complement to enhance biological control in IPM programs. Biological control by conservation is based on two principles. One is not kill, and we are now using in a better way the phytosanitary chemicals, but also we should it's based on the habitat management in a way that we can introduce some elements that can provide the natural enemies all the resources they need to be close to our crops, doing that natural regulation of pests. So we know that in our company, we think that establishing green infrastructures is a form of ecological intensification that increases the abundance and diversity of natural enemies. Ecological intensification is a new trend that means that we can improve the profitability and the yield of our crops, but taking into account biological processes like biological control or mutualistic relationships, for example, between the microorganisms of the soil and the health of the plant. We can improve the yield, improving these biological processes. For us, a green infrastructure is any element of our ecosystem that is not the crop, that can give the resources to the natural enemies to stay there. These things that the crop in itself can't give them. We are going to focus on ecological infrastructures based on natural vegetation, but also we can talk about, for example, nets for bats or for birds that also can feed on pests. Also, have you heard about insects, hotel of insects, or many any element that can give them these resources? We are going to focus on plants, and we are working in different ones, but I'm going to focus on hedgerows, biodiversity islands, and cover crops, which are different ecological infrastructures with different purposes that are complementary. We are focused on functional biodiversity because in the last 14 years, we've been researching how biodiversity of native plants can help us to design more stable agricultural systems based on the plants that have the ability to conserve and attract mainly natural enemies that can control the pests that are damaging our crops. It's not to improve biodiversity per se, but we are trying to improve or to enhance the presence of that arthropods that are useful for this. So that the identification of plants that are attractive to the natural enemies is a key milestone in the design of functional ecological infrastructures. And when we are designing these ecological infrastructures, we have to take into account that their functionality depends on its ability to look like an habitat. And this is not easy. We have to take into account that in nature, complex systems promote complex trophic webs and optimum natural pest regulation, and we should design multi-specific ecological infrastructure. It means that we have to combine a sort of plants and have a good selection of them in a way that we are able to provide all the resources they need, like shelter, of course, food, in direct food like pollen, nectar, floral or extrafloral one, sap or fluids, or indirect food like honeydew, but also we have to provide them prey and alternative hosts. So we should select plants that are able to provide these resources throughout the year, and like in a flower cascade. And it's not easy because not because growers or technicians don't have to be botanists or entomologists, so it's not easy to design a functional ecological infrastructure. I don't know why I can't go to the next slide.
Just press in the middle of the picture and then you can,
Okay.
if you press in the middle, then it usually works.
Okay. Sorry, I'm a little bit nervous. I'm also tired. Has been a tough. Okay. Uh-oh. I don't know what's happening. Okay, I'm going to open, I think. Okay. Sorry. technology. Okay.
But do you have more slides in the presentation?
Not many more. Okay. Not many more. I'm finishing. I think I have it.
Otherwise, if you don't manage, I could.
Yeah, yes. Can you see the presentation?
Yes.
Okay.
Hedgerows.
Okay. Hedgerows are permanent ecological infrastructures composed of shrubs, species of different size and structures. And its purpose is, okay, what happened? Oh, I don't know what is happening. Okay. They are usually planted around the perimeter of the plot to act as a barrier, interconnected natural vegetation patches where these natural enemies, native ones, are living, and it should act as a barrier to impede the free movement of the pest between the greenhouses, for example, or between the plots where nobody can, if the hedge is not there, nobody impede their movement. So these ecological infrastructures should invite the natural enemies to leave these natural patches, interconnecting them, and should act as a kind of highway. The ability of a space is crucial to a correct selection of and combination of plants to be used, because space is the problem, and we don't want the growers to spend more time taking care on these ecological infrastructures. So we should decide very well which plants we are going to introduce. And now here you can see two examples of well-designed hedges, mature ones, more than 7 years, that are they are working well, they are giving the results, they are not having many space. The grower is not worried about if they are shading the crop or they have to prune. And in the other side, in the bad design, you can see hedge based on only one species, an exotic, an invasive one, or ornamental ones that is not worth it for the purpose because they are more attractive for pests, or a big one that is causing problems to the growers. So it's very important to be there with the growers interested, and we provide customized designs adapted to each plot, and also we facilitate the access to the plants because we are working on native plants, and sometimes it's not easy to find all the species. So we provide the growers a kind of designs very easy to put into the field, and without any necessity to know the plants or how to combine them. On the other hand, we are also working on biodiversity islands that are really useful to improve the inoculative biological control. And they are small islands that made by 2 or 3 small species that can't compete with the crop, and improve biological control through the encouraging the presence of the released natural enemies, as well as the non-commercial one that can come from the hedge, take into account that the natural enemies have a little possibility of flight long distances. So these biodiversity islands serve to interconnect and invite to colonize the inner part of the crop in a natural way, and they favor in the preventive and early establishment of the auxiliaries. Also, there are no pests, so it's a really useful tool to improve biological control strategies. We can place them in any place where the grower have, and place interconnecting them in a way that any insect can find a resource in at least 30, 50 meters round. So it's a nice ecological infrastructures, also based on native plants that are less attractive to pests. And at the last thing, this is my last slide, is if you are working on fruit trees, cover crops are really useful and essential because they integrate the soil function, and they provide different and complementary natural enemies of the hedge. These kind of ecological infrastructures face many challenges, mainly in the Mediterranean basin, because they are difficult to establish in rain-fed, low rainfall areas. They should not have very competence with the crop. They should be attractive to the auxiliary fauna and compatible, of course, with the management of the crop. So we are designing this kind of meadows with rustic native species able to grow in dry conditions, herbaceous character, and annual cycle, because we want to reduce the management and don't have to cut them, and with natural residing, flowering in chains, nectar and pollen produces, low vegetative development, and competitive root system. And to say goodbye, and only to remind that we have many natural enemies that we can integrate into our crops by means of innovative and resilient strategies. This is the modern agriculture, and thank you all, and sorry for the problems, and I'm here if you have any question. So.
Thank you so much, Monica. Are there any questions or any comments? Anybody who would like to share maybe? I wanted to say that I checked the answers on Menti, and there's one person who works on a farm. I don't know if this person already left, but if you're here, we are very happy to have you here. Yeah, any questions? No questions.
We have developed when I was working in the research center, we developed a kind of DSS to design this hedgerow. It's a web you can consult. It's in Spanish. I can write you the name because there you can find all the research we did to select the proper plants and which kind of natural enemies are associated with these plants. And also in this web, you can find at least 84 documents related with this was an operational group working on biodiversity in different crops, and there you can find the papers, fact sheets, many information about this kind of topics. And also, if you want, I don't know if, but this app and summarize the findings of the 28 shrubby plants that we studied and which natural enemies are associated. So
Thank you. Thank you for the resources. There's actually one question in the chat, and good that you use this channel, because I forgot to say it, but you can obviously write your questions in the chat. So the question goes, we use these techniques in Sweden, but it's harder to get the larger growers to adapt to this. How do you succeed?
it's difficult. From the very beginning, we started to advise them, to explain many talks and visits to the plot, explaining how the biodiversity can help them to be more efficient and to differentiate their crops in terms of yield and vision. And it was 10 years trying to change their mind and start working with that ones that were little bit influencers, and they did the rest of the job because they wanted to start and they show the results to the rest of the growers. But it's difficult work. Now, I think the problem is that they are convinced, but we should explain and advise them how to manage biodiversity, because they think with 2-3 ornamental plants it's enough, and if you introduce flowers it's enough, but it's not. So the problem is lot of transference, explain, talks, visits, showing them how it works and explaining that it's not easy, it's not more difficult, but it's a different management. So it's I think this is the point. Little by little.
Yes, and concerning that, is the government paying the advices, or is the advice free?
The advice is free. And now with the, do you know the, how do you say, OPCH's organic fruit and crops, I don't know the English. OPCH, do you know, Alba? Operational programs. They are introducing sí, los programas operativos de las OPCHs, organizaciones de productores de frutas y hortalizas. It's not from the
vegetable producers organizations, but yeah. I don't know.
They work with operational programs and they obtain subvención.
Subsidies.
For subsidies to improve innovations, and now they are asking in their operational programs to introduce hedge and the islands and the management of the biodiversity, but right now, not in the past.
Yeah, okay, thank you so much, very interesting.
Little by little. There's another comment by Sarah. It goes, thanks. In Sweden, we work mainly with diversity inside the greenhouses. For example, clover as a companion crop or different crops in sequence. It was just a comment. And then another question from Helene. Hello, super interesting presentation. Thank you, Monica. I have a question. Of course, it depends on the size of the farm as well as the type of production and other IPM strategies. But roughly, what is the scale of investment needed for these hedgerows?
Wow. For this hedgerow, the interesting thing is everyone in a territory size put hedgerow, interconnecting them. This will be useful in midterm time. One hedgerow maybe is not functional, but is maybe they are not going to see the effects, but it's worth it. And at the end, they are not causing more problems. And we, in the IDEAS project, published that the function of the hedge is bigger when the landscape is more and more simple. If your landscape is not simple, is diverse, and you have many, the landscape have a big effect on the functionality of the hedge. If the landscape is very diverse, you are not going to be able to measure the function of the hedge. But if the landscape is very, very simple, as we have, you notice the difference. But the difference will be when everyone have a hedge and we can connect all the ones and invite the natural enemies to colonize again the landscape. So I don't know if I have answered your question. The scale should be territorial scale.
Helene, did Monica answer your question? Yes.
Yeah, super interesting. But more in terms of actual investment, in terms of monetary resources needed to implement these hedgerows, do you have any estimation? And again, of course, it depends on the size of the farm and other strategies that are already being applied, etc. But just to have a very rough idea of the budget needed to implement these changes on the farm.
As many as you can introduce. And IOBC, I think, said that at least, I don't know if it is 5% of your farm should be dedicated to ecological infrastructures, but I think it's very few. I think as more as you can implement, it's better and enhance better your biological control.
I think Helene wanted to hear more in terms of financial investment.
Oh, financial. Okay. It's not. Okay. It's not a very expensive investment because you only have to do it once, and it's not too much for a grower. Most of them are doing it for their own without any subsidies, so it's not very too much. It's not very expensive.
Yeah, that's a good point, especially if you're using plants that last for many years.
Yes.
And
yes.
they adapt well because they're native.
Yes.
It is time to move to the next presentation if there are no more questions. So thank you so much, Monica. I'm gonna hand over the floor to Jérôme.
Okay, thank you. Do you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, good afternoon to you all. And thank you, Alba, and the IFOAM team for having given me the opportunity to present some results. I will present you some ideas on how to integrate service plants in greenhouse horticulture to improve pest control. I belong to the GRAB, Research Group for Organic Farming, which is located in southern France. We are about 15 researchers We are an organic producers association, and we make applied research. That means that we make trials on farm, on commercial farm, but also on our experimental farm. We work for organic, vegetable, fruit, and wine production. And the topics we work are fertility, soil tillage reduction, varieties, cultivation methods, crop protection. And we work also on more prospective topics like functional biodiversity and agroforestry. The goal of GRAB is to provide technical references, but also to make sure innovation is transferred to farmers. What is the situation if we consider pest control in southern France? The dominant cropping systems for vegetable productions in southern France are greenhouses for organic. And if we consider also conventional production and soilless production, we can find also glass houses. These crops are intensive crops, and pest management is a key point for success and failure of the crop. That's why pesticides are used in conventional farming, and in organic farming, pests and diseases cause huge economic losses. One of the tools which is used, as Monica said, is the biological control, but we see on the farms that the efficacy is in fact quite variable. And we decided a few years ago to work on a new tool that was the functional biodiversity, which is also called biological control by habitat management. The idea is to complexify the agro ecosystem, like as Monica said, because the natural enemies require much more shelters, different food compared to pests. That implies the introduction of service plants in the crops. That means plants which will provide an agroecological service, but which will not be marketed. In France, these works are quite recent, about 15 years. The first step, as Monica said, is to identify candidate species as service plants. So we work on publications, scientific publications, but also screenings in situ. That means that we put the plants, the candidate species, inside the greenhouses, outside the greenhouses. In summer or in winter, in autumn, the season is very important. And then there is a tough selection. We choose only rustic plants. In southern France, they have to be tolerant to drought and heat. The seeds and plants should be available. We speak about wild species, native flora, and it's not very obvious sometimes to find these seeds and to obtain plants from nurseries. We choose, first of all, local origins, then French ones, and then European ones for the seeds. As you see on the picture on the right, the geometry of the flower must suit to natural enemies requirements. Some of them, adults of hoverflies, lacewings, parasitoids, wasps, have very little mouth, local pieces, so the flowers must be very open. And the chemical composition of the pollen, of the nectar, must be okay for the requirements of the natural enemies. Each species should bloom for a long time, but early or late flowering is very interesting also, because the insects can make reserve stocks before hibernation, and the mortality is also reduced. Some species provide extra floral nectar. One aspect which is very interesting, very important, is that some species provide alternative prey and hosts, and you see on the picture on the right aphids, specific aphids on a knapweed, and ladybirds feeding on these specific aphids. And we have to check that these species don't host pests. Here you've got a table with a few species which we have proved to be interesting, and my colleague Van Rooyen from the University of Amsterdam, we quite agree on about the choice on the species here in the table. You've got many species from Apiaceae because the flowers, the florets are not very deep. Species from Asteraceae with shallow florets, species from Fabaceae, and some in Fabaceae natural enemies can find specific aphids, and you've got other species. You see that you can have annual ones like coriander, but also perennial ones like fennel. And in the later choice we'll make on the farm, we have to take into account these aspects. Once we have chosen the service plants, the right species, we have to integrate these service plants in the cropping systems. And here we face to human beings, and we have to adapt, first of all, to the grower. What is the available time of the grower? What knowledge of pests and natural enemies for the grower? Which risk is he able to take? What is his level of curiosity? In fact, if you cross all these criteria, we see that the adaptation must be very personal. Then we have to adapt to the cropping systems. Are the crops in open field or in shelter, in glass houses, in greenhouses? What are the main crops? What are the most frequent pests? And then we have to adapt to the terrain. On the farm, there are some pre-existing semi-natural habitat in terms of quantity, of quality, and we have to identify, preserve, and develop them. That means that we have to change our way of thinking, that when we think about service plants, we have to move from weeds. In French, we call them mauvaises herbes, bad herbs, from weeds to service plants. We have to change the scale of the study. We used to work at the plot level. As Monica said, we have to dezoom and to work at least at the farm level, but the landscape level is also interesting. Once we have identified some progressed areas, lack of connection, if some surface is available, we can discuss with the producer and implement specific infrastructures to enhance the presence of natural enemies. So you see, there are several steps, but it's a real co-construction. We have scientific data, but you have to cross them with the human aspects, the grower. We are trying to complexify the system, but the system must be must rely realistic for the producer. And there is no real recipe. It's not like a pesticide with a dose. There is no real recipe. We can propose, and the producer makes what he wants. So then, which service plants do we choose? Which system? Do we put them outside or inside? Do we choose annual or long-term infrastructures? At what time, at what period do we implement them? How many plants? I hope I will give you some ideas, or at least I will present you some results of a project. This project is called Cosinus, is funded by the French Ministry of Agriculture and OFV. The idea was to work on a very typical rotation, Solanacea, leafy vegetable, Cucurbitaceae, 3 times. So the project is 6 years long. We work in greenhouses, cropping systems. The objective for the conventional partners is to reduce pesticide, but for us, it was to maintain or improve economic performances. The main labors we work are agroecological infrastructures. We have a system approach. That means that we have combined many strategies, and we have tried to see the contribution of each infrastructures. We have worked also on decision rules and how to combine the different levers for an effective pest regulation. First of all, there is a phase of diagnostic. We were helped by a naturalist association. Here you see the map of the producer with here 20 plastic tunnels. Each of them is 600 square meters, and then you've got orchards on the eastern part of the farm. You've got hedges, you've got pathways, you've got weed strips between the greenhouses. After this phase of diagnosis, there were some proposals. Agroecological infrastructures implemented close to the tunnel, and we will see them later on. The idea was to plant some hedges to have a natural hedge. That means that we stopped mowing on these embankments to have native shrubs grow. We implement bat shelters for the control of moths and tuta absoluta, which is a pest of the tomato. We worked also on optimized weed management. That means that we not mowed all the weeds at the same time. We mowed only the half of these weed strips to maintain a natural shelter based on natural flora. If we zoom on the agroecological infrastructures close to tunnels, here you've got the greenhouse. We have sown flower strips outside the greenhouse. We have planted in the greenhouse at the level we are at the outer edge of the greenhouse at the bottom of the arch. We have planted alyssum, yarrow, birdfowl trefoil, which are plants favorable to natural enemies against aphids, and marigold, which is favorable to predatory myriaday bugs, which are predators of whiteflies, spider mites, and tuta. Between the arches, you've got some cereals which were sown during the previous autumn in September or October. In the middle of the greenhouse, we have planted alyssum, which provide honey for butterflies. We have introduced some bunker plants, cereal with specific aphids and mummies on it. And sometimes we have made some active transfer between from the flower strips to the crop. A few pictures. Here you see alyssum in an eggplant of an eggplant crop. Here you see marigold at the outer edge of the greenhouse. Here you see the bunker plants with cereals. If we have a look of what happens outside, you see here the flower strips, and you have the composition of the flower strips. It means a mixture of annual and perennial interesting species. And here you see that the natural flora is not mowed. What happens in the tunnels? Here you see zucchini with alyssum, yarrow, alyssum, marigold. Tomato, you can guess here the white flowers of alyssum. Alyssum also here, yarrow. And in bean crop, you've got alyssum on the row. Once we have done this implementation, I want to zoom on the sample collection and identification. When we work on the functional biodiversity, we must know what we study. And we used an hoover, which collects insects in the nets. And then there is a big work to sort the vegetable parts, the mineral parts, and to extract the insects. And there is a big work of identification to see the diet of the insect, or their pests, or their natural enemies. So this is a very important part of our work. A zoom on the cereals. Here you've got a very young crop of cucumber, and the cereals you can see here were sown during September, just before the plantation of the spinach, which were the previous crop. And what we hope is what happened is the presence of specific aphids on the cereals very early in the season. Here you see the samples we made on the cereals. You see that even in March, we have got already some parasitoids, aphid parasitoids. The cucumber was planted on the 2nd of April, and you see that a few days later there are quite a lot of aphids, parasitoids on the cereals, and on the 13th of May there are plenty of aphid use on these cereals. That was in the cereal strip. If we check what happened in the cucumber, we see that the arrival of the parasitoids is very soon in the crop, and the peak of presence of the parasitoids is in the same time than the peak of presence of the aphids. And if you look the number, you've got 2 aphids for 1 parasitoid, which indicates that the regulation was very effective. And a few weeks later, you see the population of aphids has decreased a lot. So these cereals, they can provide a very soon resource of aphidius, of native aphidius, which is a parasitoid of aphid. If we look at the other species like yarrow, alyssum, marigold, we see that they can provide a huge diversity of natural enemies all year long. Many generalist predators, but also specific predators of aphids, which is one of the major pests in southern France. And for instance, yarrow, we find a huge number of parasitoids during April and May, because there are specific aphids on yarrow at this period. And what is interesting is the very beginning of the year and also the end of the season. What happens on marigold? You see there are a lot of generalist predators, and a huge proportion of these predators are Macrolophus pygmaeus, which is a predatory merited bug, which is used in biological control to control whitefly. And we use them as a shelter for predatory merited bugs against whiteflies, spider mites, and tuta. And you see the level. You can imagine in France, 1 Macrolophus pygmaeus is 11 cents of euros. So when you've got 100 Macrolophus on 1 plant, you've got 17 euros in natural enemies. The problem is that Macrolophus, they love living on marigold, and they have the fear to leave this shelter to colonize the crop. So we need to help them to optimize the service. Here you see in the 19th of May, there were no Macrolophus in the crop. 10 is the number of Macrolophus on 1 plant. We cut the stems of marigold. We first checked how many Macrolophus were on the stems. We cut them, we put them in the trashes, and we put the stems in the crop. And you see the week after, we were at 0 individual per leaf, and then the population is quite homogeneous. So we have helped the colonization of the crop by making the active transfer. Here it's not the cosinus trial, but here we've got we can meet quite big marigold strips in more specialized cropping systems, especially when tomato is a part important of the cropping system. It is sown in the previous summer, last summer or winter or autumn. There is here a drip irrigation. And then there is a global active transfer on tomato when tomato is here during April or May. Here you've got an example on one commercial farm. The marigold was sown on the 15th of July, 70 meters with drip irrigation. We went a few months later in March and we found 100,000 Macrolophus on these strips. Two weeks later, the tomato was transplanted, and the transfer was made a few days later, and it was equivalent to 20 Macrolophus per square meter of crop, which is a very huge dose. 2 months later, we monitored in the crop, and there were 2 Macrolophus per leaf and no pests at all. So it is now used in France in very intensive organic greenhouses for whiteflies, spider mites, tuta regulation, and is also used for localized transfers when there are specific pest outbreaks on certain parts of the greenhouse. Conclusion about charges and financial aspects. If we consider just the charges concerning crop protection, that means labor, but also inputs. We did the calculation for the last 5 years of the trial. Our system based on agroecological infrastructures compared to a reference system, we'll see that there is a bit more labor to be a bit more labor. It's plus 20%. That means that there is work of human to monitor, to make the active transfer, to plant the plants, etc. But we make quite a huge economy. We save money because we reduce the inputs by 50%, and the largest parts of the inputs are biological control. We reduce the dose and the number of releases of natural enemies by 50%. In total, we reduce by quite a third of the charges if we consider crop protection. To conclude about integration of service plants, we need to choose the right species. We have to put them at the right place. We have to ensure careful monitoring. This is the base of pest management in organic farming, but also in farming in general. And first of all, we have to take into account growers' constraints. The science tells us to complexify the ecosystems, but in front of us, we have got some human beings already dealing with quite complex world, agronomy, economy, market, etc. So we have to take their constraints into account. We have verified that this plant can provide a real service. We can put data of efficacy using this agroecological infrastructure. So it's a real new tool for pest regulation, especially for spider mites, aphids, whiteflies, and tuta. But it must be considered as a complement to other measures like biological control, prophylaxis, eventually pesticides. Monica told us about hedges. When you speak about hedges, you can imagine that these are long-term strategies. We speak about ecological equilibrium, so it's not immediate. Often the efficacy is a few months later or at least the year later. The efficacy is not guaranteed. We propose some infrastructures which should be interesting for natural enemies, but sometimes it takes time, but sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't work. in fact, it works more than it doesn't work. When it works well on farms, on commercial farms, when the producer incorporates the infrastructures into the cultural itinerary. If we consider that like just an accessory, he doesn't have the time to dedicate time to implement or monitor these infrastructures. So when it works well, the situation is a producer that has incorporated the infrastructures in the cultural itinerary. Unfortunately, some pests, we have very little hope concerning functional biodiversity. If we consider Colorado beetle, flea beetle, bugs, for the moment, there's not real hope for infrastructures which could improve the regulation. So there's still much work to do inside the greenhouses, outside the greenhouses. We have many new pests arriving in Europe, and the flower strips and the agroecological infrastructures are good tools to prevent this invasion because they provide a more balanced ecosystem, and they can shelter more generalist predators. Thank you for your attention, and I will be happy to answer if there are some questions.
Thank you, Jérôme. You got some virtual applauses.
Thank you.
Yeah, are there any questions?
Well, have you counted the economics in these specific trials? If you showed us the figures that you save this money, but have you done it on farm level, or are these assumptions, or?
Yes, the yields were on the quality and the quantity of the was equivalent. That means that the income was the same, but the charges were reduced. So the margin, I don't know the name in English. The difference was higher for our system.
And are the growers positive? Are they interested? Are they happy with the system?
Yes. There are 20 greenhouses, and I especially worked on one greenhouse, and the 19 other greenhouses, they were monitored and planted by the producer. And he's also very happy because when we make visits on the farm, he's proud to explain that he understands what he does. He can show the natural enemies to the other producers. And when I spoke about curiosity and this is part of the job, and when you've got some producers like that, they make part of the job because they are a good advertisement for the neighbors.
And just a detailed question: how many do you have to sow the marigold, the large marigold, several times a season? Because in Sweden, if you don't dehead them, then the crop it dies out. So you have to reseed. Do you have to reseed it?
Yes, there is a mortality for the marigold. Less mortality in the glass house systems, maybe because in winter it's warmer. But we have to replant or reseed. That's why I speak about the implication of the producer. He has to integrate the reseeding and the replantation in the cultural itinerary. But there are still marigolds surviving, which are shelters for the mackerel fish during winter.
All right. I actually have a question, and it can be for any of the two speakers, or maybe even someone else who has experience in working on adoption of these practices. So I was wondering what the challenges are, because at the end of Monica's presentations, we talked um, about growers finding it difficult to adopt the practices. So what challenges do you face, or what challenges do you observe that make it difficult for these practices to be adopted?
In my case, we are working on the Mediterranean basin where the rainfall is always very few, but at least it rained. It was usually that in autumn you have some rain, and these plants during winter usually are very functional till May. And some of them also are active in summer, but the last 3 years we are not having the rainfall in the proper time, so these plants sometimes receive water in late spring, so they developed a lot, and then in summer they get dried. So it's difficult right now in this moment with the climate change to look for the proper moment to establish a good hedgerow. Also, they are native shrubby plants, so water is a problem. If you irrigate these plants a lot, they are losing their rustic character. So it's difficult right now to maintain that and to find a proper moment to establish. And also we have some new pests and diseases like Xylella fastidiosa or HLB that are associated with vectors that are in these shrubby plants, the Mediterranean ones. So sometimes you have to look for not only for biodiversity of plants, that the origin of these plants is important, because sometimes these diseases can come and live in these plants. So we have to look for nurseries that produce these plants from seeds with genetic diversity, because genetic diversity of the plants to use in hedge are very important to have a tool against these bacteria that can be problematic. Also, thrips like thrips or parvispinus, trip parvispinus, that are not associated with flowers are an important challenge. Growers are afraid of improve or enhance the population of these pests that are not associated with flowers and that can live in this kind of plants. That are my main challenges. I don't know if Jerem has another problems.
Many problems, not many, but there are two types of problems. There is a lack of scientific publication about way of life of natural enemies in the environment, and what are the good candidate species for us to implement on the farm. So there is a lack of scientists working on biology of natural enemies in nature. The other difficulty is to face producers, especially in this moment, with the problem of market of organic vegetable. They are quite not very enthusiastic working on new strategies, and we have sometimes to convince them, because we complexify their system, which is quite already complex. So I think it's promising as a strategy, but not every producer will apply these strategies, because some producers that just want something easy, and when you complexify the system, is very fast, too complicated for them. So I think some producers, they will rely in a comfortable situation, and they are not very interested in understand what happens in terms of interaction. And
I agree with you.
Okay, thank you. I also wanted to hear if maybe Paulina Johnson would like to share, because you were the one who mentioned that it's harder for larger growers to adapt. Did you also have something in mind?
Monica said it a few minutes before, because the huge producer in more simple landscape, they can make good progress quite easy. When the producer produce in more complex landscape, we can do better, but they're already in a rather positive situation. And we see we see the progress very nice when the structure is bigger. I see.
Yeah, I was wondering if Paulina had another perspective, because they're
well,
from Sweden.
Yeah, I was thinking that we need, as Monica was telling, we need someone who goes first, and then other farmers. Yeah.
Because it's not easy. Sometimes people think that when you use biological control by conservation, no more things you have to do, but you are working on intensive agriculture. So it's a tool. So you have to, of course, applicate IPM strategies. So you have to monitor, to be aware each year of which are your main pests, to monitor also your hedgerow and balance what is happening, and each year is different. So you have to be a more professional grower. So it's necessary for them to learn, and it's not recipes, as Jerome said. Each farm is different. So if you have a convinced grower doing it well, they can explain their colleagues how he managed the crop, but not with recipe. It is the way they do and the transition, because they have to learn, and each year is a different situation, because ecological infrastructures evolve if they are permanent. So not all the years are the same, and you have to deal and to be always paying attention of your crops. So for that growers that thinks that is easy, you have your plants and no more things to do, they are going to fail. This is the question, is for professional growers, and it's better to start with something, with a surface you can control, learn, and then extend. And for find that growers that likes to go to a talk and explain how they manage, and it's important, because I'm, as a researcher, my voice is not so useful, because I'm not using my money. It's their money, but when they talk one by one and they suffer the same problems, the message goes better.
Yeah, the message is loud and clear when it's a farmer to farmer.
Yeah, they speak the same language, so it's important to
we
find
have
that
only
time.
2 minutes left, and there are 2 more questions that I would like to address. So one of them is, well, for Jérôme, maybe also Monica. How applicable do you think these results in greenhouse are to open outdoor systems, or vice versa? If very different, what are the main factors that make them different? Can you answer that
yes,
in 2 minutes?
it's
1 minute
applicable,
each.
the context is different because in greenhouses they're used to inputs, biological control, monitoring. They're very intensive crops, and outside for crops outside, they're not ready to spend such an amount of money, and that's why we have to find some infrastructures which are not too complicated. But we have worked on flower strips for cabbage and melon, which work quite well.
Yeah, I agree with him. We are also working on citrus and persimmon crops and almond. The yield or the profitability of these crops are really lower than greenhouse crops, and we tried with these ecological infrastructures to be more resilient in an economical way, because we are going to release less natural enemies, but they are going to be there for a longer time doing the work. If you don't equilibrate or balance your crop, your farm, if you have more than 1 hectare, how it's impossible to do it releasing insects. You need your cover crops, your islands, and your hedge, because if not, it's not worth it at all. It's different. You have to manage the crop different in a different way, but it's possible. We have projects also trying to visualize this different management.
Thank you. And the last question is, what is the typical timeline to assess efficacy of the implemented IPM strategies retrospectively?
Not obvious, but I would say that you must have at least 2 years or 3 years to have more serious conclusions, because there is such a variability that 1 year is the risk of just telling stupidities.
Yeah, I always say that break is easy, to recover takes more time. So I agree with Jerome. 2 years, it is the time, 2-3 years to have some results.
And when we monitor the strips, we can check that the first year that there are some natural enemies, but the second year there are much more natural enemies
And it
than the first year.
rebalance.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Then this is a technical question. Is it possible to receive the slides presented by the two panelists after this meeting, or to find them online? Someone asked.
Yes.
I think so. I think so.
Okay.
I think I gave you
Yeah.
PDF.
Yeah, so if you consent, I can share them with the participants. Okay. Thank you so much. We are 2 minutes late, but I think this was a very good session. Thank you, Monica and Jérôme, for participating. It was a pleasure to organize this with you, and thank you, participants, for joining. I hope this was useful, and I wish you all a good weekend.
Thank you.
Okay.
It's been a pleasure.
Alba. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you.
I learned a lot also.
I'm glad. Take care. Bye.
Bye.